Happy Halloween, or happy whatever day you're watching this. And what says Halloween more than Edgar Allan Poe? Today I am going to be reading The Telltale Heart and Annabel Lee, two of his most famous works. So sit back, relax, dim the lights, maybe turn on some spooky music, and enjoy. The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. True, nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am, but why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object, there was none. Passion, there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. He had the eye of a vulture, a pale blue eye with film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh, so gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed, that no light shone out. And then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously. Oh, so cautiously. Cautiously, for the hinges creaked, I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights, every night just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work, for it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone and inquiring how he had passed the night. So you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. To think that there I was, opening the door little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea. And perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly as if startled. Now you may think I drew back, but no! His room was as black as pitch with the thick darkness, for the shutters were close fastened through fear of robbers, and so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing it on steadily. I had my head in and was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed listening, just as I have done night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief, oh no. It was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, it has welled up from my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt and pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise when he had turned in the bed. His fears had been ever since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crossing the floor, or it is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp." Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he had found all in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. And it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until, at length, a simple, dim ray, like the thread of the spider, shot from out the crevice and fell full upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all a dull blue, with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray, as if by instinct, precisely upon the damned spot. And have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over-acuteness of the sense? Now, I say, there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury, as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But even yet, I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker, louder and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous, so I am, and now at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet for some minutes longer I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder. Louder, I thought the heart must burst. And now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length, it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If still you think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught all. When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused, information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled. For what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own, in a dream. The old man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears, but still they sat and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definiteness, until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice, yet the sound increased, and what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I arose and argued about trifles in a high key and with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited by fury to the observations of the men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh God! What could I do? I foamed. I raved. I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated it upon the boards, but the noise arose over all and continually increased. It grew louder, 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 and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no! No, they heard. They suspected. They knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear these hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now, again, hark! Louder, 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 louder! Villains! I shrieked. Dissemble no more! I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here, here! It is the beating of this hideous heart! And that is The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. So I haven't engaged with that story since school. I don't even know if it was middle school or high school, but I remember being pretty spooked by it. It's so unsettling. It's an incredibly effective short story because it comes out galloping right at the gate. It comes out with such a clear point of view of this narrator. You learn a lot about this person in the first paragraph. Poe uses a very simple story with some very strong, spooky elements. The filmy eye, the lantern, the heartbeat under the floorboards. It really gets your senses going, and he combines it with an incredibly strong narrative voice. He has a character that has a very intense point of view and a very clear voice. Right off the bat, we know that this narrator is not only unreliable, but also disturbed. He speaks of a disease that Poe never returns to and never actually tells us what it is, but he gives all these hints that this person that we are hearing from is not well, despite how much they reassure you that they're perfectly well. If you're well, you usually don't have to reassure people that you are over and over again. I think it's a very interesting exploration of how guilt can manifest in different ways. I think there's a couple levels to this narrator. I think there is the subconscious mind-body situation going on, which is where the heartbeat comes from, and this sense of guilt that then manifests in this heartbeat and this anxiety. There is the more conscious mind of first being very clinical in how the murder is carried out, being very careful, being very cautious. And then there is this layer of the storytelling, which is kind of over top, both the conscious mind and the subconscious mind-body. And that's where the two kind of get mixed up. Because in the telling of this tale, we hear from the nonchalance and we hear from this cautious consciousness. And then we also hear quite frequently from the anxious and guilt-ridden subconscious mind-body. And I think it's a really interesting narrative exploration of how the telling of a tale kind of reveals a lot about, I don't know what I'm doing with my hands, kind of reveals a lot about a person's subconscious and conscious mind, how, you know, the Freudian slips happen. I think that we can think one thing, feel another thing, and then when we start talking about our experiences and we try to keep it on what we think, what we feel really bubbles up and becomes apparent. And while I'm sure this isn't really what Poe is going for, I do think it's a very interesting phenomenon to then think about how we talk about our experiences, good or bad, and how we reveal ourselves in narrative. In many ways, talking about our experiences is a synthesizing of our conscious mind and how we have thought in our heads about our experiences and how our subconscious mind-body situation has experienced those things. And how talking about and narrativizing and storytelling is kind of a mix, a very revealing mix of everything, regardless of how much we try to segment how we feel versus how we think. Storytelling becomes inherently messy. And that's why good storytelling is true, is because it allows that mess to occur, that mixing of our conscious mind and like the clean logical reasoning that we try to have about our life and our experiences, and the more messy, human, complex subconscious body experience that we have. Maybe I lost the plot, but that's what this story has made me think about. Annabel Lee by Edgar Allan Poe. It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived, whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden, she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child, and she was a child, in this kingdom by the sea, but we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee, with a love that the winged seraphs of heaven coveted her and me. And this was the reason that, long ago, in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee, so that her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me, to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above, nor the demons down under the sea, can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And the stars never rise, but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so, all the night-tide, I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea. I love that poem. It is fabulous to read out loud. It is so rhythmic and musical without ever completely making full rhythmic sense. It never quite settles into the da-da, 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 da. It never fully settles into that all the way through. It always kind of surprises you with a line thrown in that breaks the rhythm, or a few extra syllables, or a rhyme that doesn't quite land. I feel that it starts out, very rhythmic, very predictable, and then the meter and musicality starts to break down as we learn of Annabel Lee's death, and we learn more about the grief that this lover is feeling. And the breakdown of the verse only aids in, the narrative storytelling. Of course, all good poems, the form of the poem aids the story that it's telling. The one word that I always have trouble with is sepulcher. I always want to say sepulcher, but it's sepulcher. I also love all of the repetition, which of course, you know, it adds to the musicality, it adds to the drive of the piece. It does provide some predictability, and I think it also provides a window into the psyche of the narrator when you are repeating yourself over and over. That's very revealing about not only your mental state, but what's important to you, what you need the audience to know. I'm just gonna read every line that has Annabel Lee in it. By the name of Annabel Lee, I and my Annabel Lee, my beautiful Annabel Lee, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee, of the beautiful Annabel Lee, of the beautiful Annabel Lee, of the beautiful Annabel Lee. So it takes this journey that then ends in these, 4 repetitions of the beautiful Annabel Lee. But of course, what the narrator is really driving home is the beauty of Annabel Lee. I'm sure not just physically, but also how beautiful this person was to our narrator and how much she meant to them. So a wonderful little poem, lots to think on. I know there's a lot out there talking about the meter and rhyme scheme and more technical elements of the verse that I'm not going to get into. But if you're interested, I encourage you to seek that out. I'm sure SparkNotes talks a lot about it or other literary resources out there. I love when I read classic pieces of literature, whether that be a novel, a poem, a short story, what have you. I love when I read it and I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. That's why they're in the canon. That's why they're famous. It's like I'm let in on this human secret that has, you know, been sustained for decades or centuries, depending on how old the piece is. I love it when I'm like, yeah, I get it. Check. So thank you so much for joining me for a little bit of Edgar Allan Poe. Let me know if you're interested in a deeper dive of Edgar Allan Poe and his life, kind of like how I did for the Mary Shelley video, which I'll link somewhere on the screen. If you're interested in a deeper dive and how his life informed his work, let me know. That's something I could work on. If you liked what you heard today and aren't already doing so, feel free to subscribe. Wait, what do they say? Smash that like button, hit the subscribe, turn on notifications, the whole vibe. I don't know, I guess that's what they say. Anyway, if you're celebrating Halloween tonight, be safe, be well, have fun, and otherwise I will see you for the next one.